It's simply unbelievable what the chess fans got to witness yesterday. Magnus Carlsen and Garry Kasparov faced off against each other after 16 years. Unbelievable. You know, the first time they played each other was back in 2004. This is one of the pictures. Then Magnus was just 13 years old, and Kasparov had managed to beat him in Blitz, also beat him in one of the rapid games. But in this very game, Carlsen had held him to a draw. So that became a sensation because Garry was like the strongest player at that time, and Magnus was just a young 13-year-old kid. And now, fast forward to 2020, Magnus and Garry again playing each other, but this time chess 960 and this time in online chess. So a bit of a difference. I don't know if Garry would be as or Carlsen would be as big a favorite as Garry was in 2004. I wouldn't say so. But still, Carlsen was a huge favorite. And to add a element in this, Magnus and Kasparov had worked with each other. Kasparov was Magnus's trainer for quite some time. This was roughly around 2008, 2009, I think, this period when Carlsen went on to become the world number one and started dominating the world of chess. So with all this historical backdrop, this game was extremely interesting. So let's dive into it and see what happened. So the position we have in front of us is already very interesting to look at because it's chess 960 and it is much different from what we have in normal chess. But there are certain elements which make this position quite easy to navigate. One is the bishop is already on f1 and the knights are on g1 and b1. Also the queen being on d1 and the rooks being here. So sort of, although this position is chess 960, the only pieces which have kind of moved away from their initial squares are the king and the bishop. So that makes me feel that it was relatively easier for Kasparov and Carlsen to navigate this position. The game began with 1d4 and Carlsen responded with d5. Now knight e3, knight f6, knight to f3, e6, and we had the queen's gambit. Why not? You have everything similar, so why not play the queen's gambit? a6, and here Kasparov was very unhappy with his next move, and that's what makes this entire just this small difference also makes it very big and chess 960 so interesting. The point being that because the bishop is on e1 and e8, white has to make use of that trump in this position, and the king being on c8 and c1. Here a very good move would have been queen to c2. As Garry said after the game, he should have put his queen opposite the king and stopped black's main plan with the move c5. He just developed his knight to c3 and immediately Magnus took, bishop takes and c5. And this is when Garry realized, oh my god, the bishop being on e8 is just very good for black. It can jump out to c6 and this entire plan with c5 is now in black's favor. And so at this point, if Garry was in his element, he would have perhaps kept the queens on the board, but he was already so unhappy that he had not played queen c2 here, stopping prophylaxis against c5, that he decided that I should exchange the queens. And so after queen exchange, this is already not sort of Garry's type of position. He doesn't he likes to attack, he likes to play aggressive chess, but he took a practical choice. And now long castle. The position is already slightly pleasant for black. Knight c6, knight g5, rook d8, knight e4, and takes and bishop b6. And now if you look at this position carefully, you will realize that it's roundabout even, but it's somehow a little bit more to Carlsen's taste to play this position. And so after bishop c3, f6, here Kasparov clearly showed that he was you could say, over optimistic, or he did not feel the position so well, and he went for the move g4. And playing this move against Carlsen has its upsides and downsides. First of all, you're going to play g5, which looks very, very strong because you're hitting this pawn. If it moves ahead, already the g7 pawn is hanging. If you otherwise, there's going to be a lot of pressure on f6. So my question to you is, if you were in Carlsen's shoes, you are playing with the black pieces, what is the move that you would make here? It's black to move. What would you do? Well, Carlsen quickly understood that g5 is a big threat, and so he realized that this bishop is the key, and he played this super powerful move, bishop a5. And this is where Garry understood that this move is doing more harm to his position than any good. Bishop takes, knight takes, bishop c2, and now you can see how the bishop on e8 comes into the game, pinning the knight and also connecting everything. Rook g1, knight came to c4, rook d8, g5, and now pushing the knight away, knight c3. And once again, now it's your move here. What would you play here as black? As Carlsen, I think Carlsen made a small error here. He played the move knight to e5, but can you do it better than him? I was very impressed that in the post-game conference, Kasparov actually found the move and mentioned the move bishop f3, because this is very, very nice. You block these pawns. Once you block them, there's lack of space. Also, the knight could jump from e5 to d3. Overall, black is in the driver's seat after bishop f3. But when he went knight e5, that gave Garry the chance to gain some more space. He played f4, knight f3, rook g2, g6. And here perhaps it was already very important to play rook g3 with the idea of rook to h3, putting pressure on the h7 pawn. But Garry played the move rook f2, and after e5, Carlsen was once again pushing. e4 takes, knight e4, knight d4, now threatening to take on c2 and then to take on e4. So Kasparov went knight g3, takes, and I think the move that he missed, which he mentioned, was f5 takes, knight f5, rook takes f5, and bishop e4 check. This was missed by Kasparov, and I think that's the reason why he could no longer play f5 in this position. He had to resort to passive defense after knight e2, king e6, king d2, bishop b5, rook to f3. And now it was a big surprise to everyone as to why Magnus did not play bishop takes e2. If you see the St. Louis broadcast, Magnus very carefully played the move rook f7, and after Garry's next move, which is going to be my question to you, he was so angry with himself. Bishop e2, king e2 and ef4. It's time to resign the game, because now you just simply go king f5, you attack this pawn, you activate your rook, come in. All pawn endgames are winning for black. This would have been an easy win for Carlsen. But he went rook f7, and now it's your move as Garry Kasparov. Save yourself from Magnus. White to play. Kudos to you if you found the move rook to e3. And I think Magnus just realized that what a mistake he had made, because after bishop e2, rook e5 is the intermediate move that is causing all the harm. And here, although black is still pressing, this pawn is slightly weak. I think Garry had enough in the position to hold a draw here. Check, rook c2, rook takes, rook c7, rook d5, rook takes, rook into b2, and after a4, a5. I think here it was already difficult, but maybe king f4 makes a lot of sense. You're planning to go to g5, and then after something like king f6, maybe it's difficult to hold this endgame. I'm not so sure, but the move that Garry played h4 is losing instantly, because after rook to b4, now he's threatening to take on a4 and then on h4, when 2 pawns down would be very bad. And so rook h6 was played. Notice here that after h5 I just take, rook takes, and I now make this very solid move b6, after which you are lost. Yeah, this is a losing position. Next I'm coming and picking up this pawn. So rook h6 was played here, and now it's your move here as black. What would you play here? How to make a draw? How to win as black? Okay, Carlsen was unable to find it, so take it easy on yourself if you didn't find the move. The right move is king to d7. All other moves do not help you as effectively. In the game, king f7 was played, which turned out to be a losing move, drawing move. Sort of this bad feeling of losing, like for Carlsen. King d5 was another move, but after takes, and rook b6, it ends in a draw. Just to make it clear that rook b4, you take, this is black king has to go and stop it, and you just round up the pawns there. Now the reason why king d7 is winning is after rook takes here, you take on h4, and now this pawn cannot be saved. The only way to gain counterplay fails after king to c7. You defend these pawns, and now you pick up this pawn, and you just win the game as black. So king f7, h5 was a brilliant move by Garry. He saw it, takes, and we reach this endgame where it seems like you can win this pawn and have two protected pawns, but no, after rook b5, or even simpler, rook h7, you just win this b7 pawn, and it's a draw. So b6 was played, and here there are two ways to make a draw. One is to just play rook h6. Rook h6 would be a mistake, because after king e7 I go and stop this pawn and I take this. But there are two ways to draw. One is what Garry did in the game, rook e5, cutting the king off, and the other one is, in my opinion, rook b5, which is very, very nice and instructive, because after takes, it looks like black is winning with this protected pawn on a5, but no, the reason why this position is a draw is that opposition is in white's control. So after king e6, you play the move king e4, you don't allow him to do anything, and this is the problem here. You're going to just not be able to break through with black. For example, if you started with king f6, I would play king. If you go king f4, you will lose, because a4, you are outside the square. There's so many pawn endgame principles to learn from here. But now you take diagonal opposition, and let's say he comes here, you take vertical opposition, and if he tries to come in, you stop him. You don't go to c6, because that would lose the game. After a4 takes, a3, king c6, a2, b6, a1, b7. This is a knight pawn, and this is winning for black. But you just wait. King d4. If he comes to f3, you wait. You just keep waiting, and that's how you make a draw here. There's no way to break through. And very important point, which should be remembered here, is that let's say after king e6, king e4, king d6, king d4, if black goes a4, king c4, a3, king b3, king c5, you take, and after he takes, you play king b3, take the opposition, not letting him enter this three critical squares, which are the key squares, and it's a draw. So an important endgame lesson: rook e5 in the game was played, king f6, rook e4, and once again, this is very interesting, because here the opposition does not matter. King e6, king d4, king d6, king c4, king c6, king d4. You just cannot enter here. Even though black has the opposition, it doesn't help him. There's no way to win this position for black. So therefore, Magnus played rook b3, king d2, king f5, rook h4, and in the end he had to exchange. Garry knew that this is a drawn game, even if he does not have the opposition. If he has the opposition here on the 5th rank, he needs the opposition. Yeah, that way he stops his opponent from entering. King d6, king d4, king c6, king c4, b5, and the players agreed to a draw, because after takes, king b3, you just go to the side of the board and draw the game. This was really a brilliant result for Garry to draw against the world champion, super strong Magnus Carlsen, because Magnus is really a beast, and the way he was winning in the game, to fight back from such a position showed that Garry still has it in him to play at this level. When the game ended, it was very interesting that some of the players, especially Emil Sutowski, made this very nice tweet saying, Kasparov versus Carlsen, Garry tries to hold an endgame almost identical to the one held by Botvinnik versus Fischer in 1962. What a story. And also over here, Anish Giri said that on my stream, great minds. And so it's very curious, and we need to see what exactly happened in this very famous game of Fischer versus Botvinnik, because if you just have a look at this, it shows that end games, studying them, are going to help you in chess 960 as well. So basically they reached this position, and Fischer was black over here, Botvinnik was white, and look at the position carefully. It was in Olympiad. This is, I think, the only time that Fischer and Botvinnik played against each other. And for Fischer, it was like a battle with the Soviets, and he was like, I have to beat them. And he had a winning position against the greatest player at that time, Mikhail Botvinnik. And here he just sort of went in and exchanged the bishop for the knight. If he had just improved his position, let's say with a5 or moves like that, he would have won the game. But knight e4, takes, and now you see the similarities between Kasparov and Carlsen. Rook a3 was played. Maybe rook c7 was a better move here by Botvinnik, but he went rook a3, rook e7, rook f3, rook c7, a4, rook c5, rook f7, rook a5, take, h4, king f5, rook f7, king e5. This is fantastic play. Here maybe f4 draws the game according to modern engines, but rook g7 was played, rook a1, king f3. Still everything is sort of drawish. b5 was not a great move, but already the position is quite drawish. King d4 is a possible move, and this has to be analyzed deeper, but it seems like with the modern engines, perhaps this position is also drawn. But b5, Botvinnik managed to play h5, just like Garry. He was hanging on and managed to draw the game, because after check, rook into b5, and then eventually the game ended in a draw. And I can say that Fischer was livid with himself for missing this chance, and I'm sure that Carlsen also was. Well, that's how chess is. It's complicated. These are the standings after day one. Dominguez leading with Carlsen on 2.5. Wesley So on 2. Kasparov on 1.5. He also beat Firuza from a minus position. So Garry's fighting there. He lost to Swidler, but Caruana on 1.5, Aronian on 1.5, Naka, Swidler on 1.5, Firuza on half, and MVL still to score his first point. But for now, let me leave you with this image of the two players, the two greatest ever players ever to have played the game, Kasparov and Carlsen, playing against each other in 2004 and now in 2020. What a big honor to watch them play. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Thank you all. Bye bye.